Mr. Speaker, I rise today to inform this Honorable House of an agreement with local banks to support additional housing development in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, on numerous occasions, both inside and outside of this Honorable House, I've articulated that the top priority of this government is to increase the stock of affordable housing. That is the reason this government has increased investment of affordable housing by $15 million, with an additional $10 million investment announced in this year's budget. Mr. Speaker, the government cannot build all of the housing needed by itself, and to provide incentives for the private sector to play its part, the government, through the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, established the Approved Residential Scheme Program in June 2022. This scheme provides incentives for the private sector to increase the stock of available housing units and stimulate growth within the island's 3 economic empowerment zones. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, despite the hard work being done by the BDC and other stakeholder groups, the cost of borrowing was identified as a barrier to prospective investors and developers in moving their plans to the construction phase, which consequently impacted the progress of approved residential schemes being constructed. But, Mr. Speaker, this government understands that simply identifying the issues is not enough, and therefore, after significant stakeholder engagement and extended negotiations, I am pleased to announce that last week the government signed a memorandum of understanding with 3 local banks to launch what we refer to as the Approved Residential Scheme Kickstart program. Under this initiative, the government has committed to provide a maximum aggregate $50 million government guarantee to support approved residential scheme opportunities within the economic empowerment zones. In return for the reduced risk, participating banks, which include HSBC Bermuda, Clarion Bank, and Bermuda Commercial Bank, have committed to offer preferred interest rate to eligible applicants. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that as the size and scope of potential projects may vary, so does the associated risk, and as a result, there is no agreed set interest rate. However, each of the participating banks have committed to offer successful applicants a discounted rate which will meaningfully reduce the cost of development, which is necessary for the private sector to complement the government's efforts in building more housing in Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, other key terms of this MOU stipulate that the total guarantee limits will not exceed $50 million. The government guarantee shall remain in place for 6 years after completion of the construction project, and therefore will not be in place for the entire length of the mortgage. And, as with the mortgage guarantee program, the government will not have any involvement and or influence on the bank's credit underwriting or enforcement decisions. Mr. Speaker, to be clear, investors and developers interested in large-scale residential and mixed-use building projects within our EEZs can apply to be a part of the approved residential scheme through the Uptown Development Authority. If approved, applicants will not only be eligible for tax, customs duty, and other incentives, but will also be eligible for a reduced interest rate for their project as well. For more information on the approved residential scheme guidelines, opportunities, incentives, and how to apply, I encourage interested persons to visit the Uptown Development Authority's website at www.uda.bm. Mr. Speaker, all local banks were invited to participate in this important initiative, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the 3 participating banks, HSBC Bermuda, Clarion Bank, and Bermuda Commercial Bank, for their efforts in working with the government with this program, which we believe will support our economic growth as the government remains committed to successfully executing Bermuda's economic development strategy. I would also like to thank the Honorable Member, MP Jashay Adams, teams within the Ministry of Finance, and the staff of the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation for working with the government to bring this initiative to reality. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue to use every tool at its disposal to ensure that more housing units are brought online. The private sector has a critical role to play, and we will continue to work with the private sector so that together we can ensure that there is adequate, quality, and affordable housing to support Bermuda's economic growth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.